Hello, everyone. Just going to give people a few moments to get their audio dialed in before we start here. Welcome.
Geez, I put pants and a shirt on for this. I didn't realize.
Now all of our attendees know. For as long as this recording exists, everyone will know that Dale is wearing pants.
And a shirt.
And a shirt. All right, so while more people file in, we'll make sure that this is all typed out in the chat to reference later on, but welcome to today's webinar. Before I hand it off to today's moderators and presenters, just want to cover a few quick technical details. This is Zoom webinar, not Zoom meeting, so you don't have to worry about being seen or heard. You can't interrupt us. That does mean your interaction options are a little more limited. You can use the chat if you have just some comments or you want to have a discussion. If you want everyone to see your comment, make sure you select all panelists and attendees from the little drop down there. If you have a question, go ahead and pop that in the Q&A. It's much easier for us to manage the questions if you put that in there. And if you have any technical issues, feel free to use the raise hand feature and one of the hosts will come and assist you in whatever way we can. So without further ado, I want to hand it off to Julia Finocchi. Julia?
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for the EDGE 3.0 user group, the June 2021 edition. Joining me today at the helm are Drew Carlisle, the assistant EDGE developer at Acro, and Jasmine Saidi-Kunert, the IESC, the chair and founder, president of and CEO of ACEI. Jasmine will share with you who's here on the from the IESC committee on the call, and I'll turn it over to her. Jasmine.
Thank you so much, Julia. Hello, everybody. It's great to be here again in our monthly EDGE user guide webinar. I am joined today by a couple of my colleagues who serve on the IESC. I have Robert Watkins, who is with UT Austin. I have Dale Goff, who is with Foreign Credential Service of America. I believe we have also some additional members who are joining us. I think we have Bill Paver with FCSA and Emily Say with IERF. And as you can see from the image, we have a number of other members. We also have our fellows, who are individuals that are selected each year to become research fellows that get assigned a particular subject or topic related to the world of international education credentials. And we have had our initial series of fellows tackled the issue of the offshore medical schools in the Caribbean. We'll have an update on that. And our new fellows will be tackling the Bologna compliant degrees. So a little bit about the IESC. We are a volunteer group. We represent public and private institutions of higher ed, as well as credential evaluation agencies. We have 6 voting members and a number of observers, as well as staff members from Acro who serve with us. Our role is to review, collect research, and approve the placement recommendations, the credential advice that you see in the country profiles. We also review and approve grading scales and their US equivalent recommendation, as well as any other supporting documentation that will help our EDGE subscribers to better understand the credentials that they're presented and are reviewing and evaluating. We meet once every 2 weeks, but within that period, we're always in touch with each other by email, and we really take deep dives into the issues that are presented to us, most by subscribers who bring any kind of new credentials to our attention that we have not been privy to, as well as if we are aware of an educational system that is undergoing change. We will also address that in the country profiles, as well as I believe there's a news feature on the EDGE subscriber page. So if you're a subscriber, you will be able to view this update. Well, That's it for this general introduction. But of course, if you have any questions about us, please post them in the chat or the Q&A. We will be able to answer those. I'll pass this on back to Julia.
Okay, thank you. And I'd also like to welcome Jennifer Minke, who just joined us and is also on the International Education Standards Council. So before we jump into the agenda, let's do a poll, as we always do, and just find out who we've got here. Question number 1 has 3 parts, and the questions are: what segment do you represent? Is this your first user group? And are you an EDGE subscriber? So we'll give you a few minutes or a minute to answer that question.
Nice to virtually see many of you again today.
Absolutely.
As Mike Sisson mentioned, we can't actually see you, but you know what I mean.
Chat. All right, excellent. Poll is done. And glad to see that so many of you jumped in, 100% voted. And it looks like, what segment do you represent? Institutional staff represent 91% or 49 of the attendees. Evaluation services, 9%. Government and law firms, don't have any of those today. Is this your first users group? About a third of you said, yes, this is. The rest of you, 69%, said, no, this is not your first meeting. And are you an EDGE subscriber? It looks like a whopping 98% of you, yay, are EDGE subscribers. That one person that's not, we sure hope by the end of this, you'll see the value of the EDGE user group and will join us as well. So thank you for participating in the poll. And now on to our agenda. So today's agenda is going to consist of our latest content updates, including the International General Certificate of Secondary Education Cambridge and the Cambridge International Certificate of Education. We talked a bit about that at the last user group meetings, but we'll just update you on that. The Juris Doctor out of Hong Kong and Haiti secondary grading scales. We'll follow that up by some news about the IESC fellowship program and what they've been busy doing, along with a couple of the mentors from the IESC. We'll talk about an upcoming webinar and then leave time for a Q&A. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to pass it back to Jasmine.
Thank you, Julia. Well, this credential, the Cambridge ICE Diploma, which is the International Certificate of Education, was brought to our attention by a subscriber. And they were asking us if this is a new document, a new credential that needs to be addressed, and if there is an educational equivalence that needs to be considered. The response to that is that it is a credential of sorts, but it doesn't represent the attainment of any additional documentation. It's actually a diploma that is awarded to exhibit a group of the subjects that a student has taken at the International General Certificate of Secondary Education, the IGCSE. And just a quick primer on the IGCSE, this is the English language-based exam, which is similar to the General Certificate of Secondary Education, and it's recognized in the United Kingdom as being equivalent to the GCSE. So the IGCSE is the international version of the GCSE. The GCSEs are offered at the domestic students in the UK. The IGCSE is offered to international schools around the world. The ICE Diploma is awarded for a group of subjects, and these subjects can be grouped into 5 curriculum areas. And these groups are, group 1 is languages, group 2 is humanities and social sciences, group 3 is sciences, group 4 is math, group 5 is creative and professional. If you are presented with this ICE diploma, you do still need to request the IGCSE exam certificate that shows the individual subjects. So this is just an award that represents completion of a minimum of 5 subject areas. It does not represent the attainment of any additional education. So again, it's an award, but it's not comparable to anything. It's just a representation of the fact that somebody has met the 5 subject minimum and they received this diploma. So please require to see the actual IGCSE exam results from the External Examining Board if you are presented with this diploma. Thank you. Again, this page is the International General Certificate of Education. This is the actual IGCSE Statement of Exam Results. So this is a document that you should be looking at, and not just the diploma that we saw earlier, not the ICE diploma. And on this, you will see more than 5 subjects listed. It's a total of 7. So this is a document that should be reviewed when you are assessing the credential for admission, for evaluation, for any other purposes. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to Hong Kong. And what we've added here is that Hong Kong is one of those jurisdictions which has more than one pathway to practicing law. And so the second avenue has just been added to EDGE. It is the degree of the Juris Doctor. This credential is a professional degree in law in Hong Kong. Admission requires a bachelor's degree in a non-law subject or a law degree from a non-common law jurisdiction. You'll note that this 2-year program, as well as the Bachelor of Law, the LLB, which is a 4-year program, give access to legal practice training, which is the postgraduate certificate in laws, sometimes abbreviated PCLL. And that's the next and further step to practice law in Hong Kong and then be admitted to the bar. So this credential has just been added. Okay. All right, I'm going to hand it on over to Robert Watkins, who's going to talk a little bit about Haiti and the suggested grading scale for the secondary level. Robert?
Thank you, Julia. Hello, everyone. Yes, and before I launch into it, let me just point out and emphasize that we are talking about the secondary grading scale, not the post-secondary scale used by the University of Haiti. This actually came up when I was helping an evaluator who was dealing with a secondary credential from Haiti that was not the baccalaureate. The person hadn't gotten that far. They'd only gotten through 10th grade. And so they were looking at class grades, rather course grades, rather than the actual baccalaureate grading. If you go to, and when I went to EDGE to see what we said, because while there's some scales I know backwards and forwards, there are some countries where I need to go back and check and see because I can't remember. What we have in EDGE for secondary grading is a 10-point scale. However, just below the tiered grading levels, we do have a notation that says this grade scale considers 1 to 10, but it should be noted that it can also appear as 1 to 20 or 0 to 100, where the highest grade on the scale would be 100%, the pass-fail would remain at 50%, and the lowest grade on the scale would be 0. In other words, 50% or better is passing in Haiti at the secondary level, regardless of the grading scale that is being used, whether it's on a 20-point scale, a 100-point, or a 10-point. In point of fact, the baccalaureate exam itself, it's graded on either multiples of 100 or multiples of 20, generally of 100, which can be then reduced by you, the evaluator, converted over to a 20-point or a 100-point, doesn't matter. What disturbed me when I looked at what we have in EDGE on the 10-point was that this blurb that I just read to you emphasized that 50% or better was passing, okay? But if you look on the scale in EDGE right this second, that 10-point scale, it says that 1 through 5 on that 10-point scale is a grade of F, okay? And the transcript that was being reviewed that I was helping out with, it was clear that 5 was the passing grade. And the blurb makes it clear that 5 would be a passing grade because it's 50%. So I knew we needed to change the scale. That's when we then started our research and getting more involved with where we could find the scale. Igcse's organization, IERF, has a couple of marvelous publications out, the New Country Index, volumes 1 and 2. So we looked at that. Also, there's a series of publications put out by the Educational Credential Evaluators in Milwaukee, ECE. And it was to that publication on Haiti that I turned. And then one of our IESC colleagues, Nancy Katz, put us on to the author of that volume, well-known credentials senior professional. She's done so many things, Liliane Baudoin, who had written that publication. And so we actually got in contact with her as well. I'm not sure what we're going to end up putting on there, but I know that 5 is not an F. We also need to emphasize, as we say on this slide here that you can see, that it is possible to pass with a grade below 50%, whether that is a 4, whether that's a 40 to 49%, whether that's some other kind of grade level, 9, 8 or 9 or something on the 20-point scale, provided the overall grade average for the year is 50% or better. In other words, it's very much the French model that we've talked about in times past when we've talked about France or Francophone countries in Africa. And that is that while the lowest passing grade may be X, 10, let's say 50%, whatever, you can have a forgiven pass or a condoned failure if you make below that, if your overall average is 100%. And so, I'm sorry, 50%. Or 20 on a 10 on a 20-point scale, 50 on a 100-point scale, et cetera. And so some variation on what you see on this slide is probably what we're going to have in the box for Haiti secondary grading when we finally get this in there. And I'll turn it over back to Drew, actually, for a note on Liliane.
Thanks, Robert. So one of the things that Robert did mention was that Liliane represented just a great source of information, and we want to recognize that contribution that she's provided. If you went over to the Haiti homepage, to the overview page, you can look on the left-hand side and you'll see where her name is actually reflected. There's a link to a profile there with a little bit of information about her. She's done publications for ECE, NAFSA, all kinds of great places. And we want to encourage all of you to reach out with this great information that we need to be sure is reflected within EDGE. So when you do reach out with that information that helps the IESC make these determinations, finish this research, we do want to reflect that on there. So if there's something that you come across when you're going through EDGE that needs to be updated, please do reach out. We do read all of your comments. As Jasmine mentioned at the beginning, the IESC meets once every 2 weeks, and they are a volunteer group that do have all of their own responsibilities in the rest of their lives. And it's great how much we're able to get through. And that list will continue to grow, and we will get to all of your questions and suggestions in the order in which they're received. So please continue to submit that over. With that, we're going to stay in the Caribbean, and let me hand this back to my colleague, Dale. Dale?
Thank you, Drew. My involvement with offshore medical schools started when I was at the University of Maryland. And I started getting calls from the Baltimore City campus of the university, which traditionally did not admit any international students to medical schools, but they were starting to deal with US citizens who had attended US modeled medical schools. In other words, schools that required a bachelor's degree for admission purposes and followed an American styled curriculum for a degree in medicine. These schools claimed to be accredited or recognized or licensed, and it became very confusing for us to figure out what exactly was going on. I began to deal with those cases on a case-by-case basis. And when I then moved to ACRO to head up International Education Services, I started getting calls from state medical licensing boards, very much similar kinds of questions. So it reached a point where I just couldn't keep up with doing the research and realized that much more intensive research was necessary. And that is why it became, we proposed it to the IESC that this was a project that would be very suitable for the fellows to undertake. They did undertake it. It took them more than a year of research to develop what will be published as a white paper on the IESC page on the ACRO website. There's a chart or a spreadsheet that is extremely intensive and goes on for many pages. And it includes schools and information that I've never seen gathered anywhere else on these kinds of medical schools. So keep an eye out for that. It's going to be done shortly. It'll be available shortly. They're in the final stages of checking resources and checking websites so that it is as accurate as can be at the time it is published. And it's something that will be available on the IESC page, which is available to non-members, which might be very useful for hospitals or medical licensing boards should they have any question about the background and suitability of accepting medical degrees from these offshore medical schools that are located in the Caribbean area. So back to Drew.
Hey, thanks, Dale. This is a wonderful example of the type of significant contributions that the IESC is encouraging from all of the fellows. So when we go out when we go out later on looking for new fellows to be participating, this is the type of substantive work that you'll be assigned. This is the type of thing that you'll get to publish, and this is the type of real long-lasting contribution that you are going to make to the field at large. We're trying to encourage the newer credential evaluators that have been in the field for less than 5 years, and so it is an opportunity for those rising stars, something to keep on your keep in the back of your mind as you're thinking about professional opportunities moving forward. And you know, the weather's just so nice down here. Let's stay in the Caribbean just a little bit longer. Julia?
Okay, next up is really a slide about the Caribbean Examinations Council webinar that we are going to be hosting July 7th. But really, I want to take a chance just to talk a little bit about all the webinars that ACRO does offer, because you'll see the link here on this page, but in reality, that link leads to all webinars. So I would encourage you to regularly check that page to find out what's going on. This webinar is, they're all free. And it really looks at how the CXC has dealt with the challenges of COVID-19. They're going to look at their protocols and procedures for the 2020 examination cycle and then update the 2021, which will have just taken place at the time of this webinar. The speakers include Dr. Wayne Wesley, who's the registrar and CEO of the CXC, and Dr. Nicole Manning, who is the director of operations there. Over on the right, you'll see all the places that are included in the CXC, all the countries that are included there. So it should be great. Oh, great, Ina. Ina just said Dr. Wesley, she couldn't wait. So we look forward to welcome you all to that webinar and to any others. And you'll see that you can go on and you can go to our webinars page there when you're done with this webinar and register for any webinars that are appropriate for you. All right, that's it. Drew, I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks, Julia. So earlier in the poll, I remember that we had someone that was here with us that is not currently an Edge subscriber. Something that we are offering now is an opportunity to have a free trial subscription. So if you navigate over to www.acro.org/edge, there's an About Edge page, and if you go over there, you can find a link to where you can get in touch with us, and we'll set you up with a free trial subscription. On the next slide, there's a little bit of information about that. When you reach out to us, you'll have access for 1 week, and you can really find out why Edge is the leading U.S. resource for evaluating those foreign educational credentials, and hope that you will see that value. Something else that I do want to mention just a little bit further in the presentation is where we talk about our international activities listserv. We are going to be in the very near future upgrading that listserv. We'll be switching over to a Google group to make it so that it is more reliable in delivering all of your messages, and it will be a little bit easier to go back and find what you were looking for from past conversations. So be on the lookout for those of you that are current subscribers to the listserv, and for those of you that are not yet signed up, we will provide all that information about the transition over. The only change that will happen in your day-to-day is that the email address where you send out those notes, where you can connect with colleagues, that email address will change. And so we will, as I mentioned, reach out to you with all of that information, but you might have to update it if it's something that you have saved in your address book. A friendly reminder, the International Activities Listserv is a great way to connect with colleagues when you're trying to determine institutional policies, when you're trying to find out how your colleagues have approached a particular situation in the past. That's a great way to connect with folks that may have already done this research. When you want to reach out to the IESC and you want to let us know about something that is missing within EDGE, a new credential that you've never seen before, a grading scale that's not there, or updated resources that would be useful for everyone, that's when you can really reach out to Acro EDGE, and we'll be able to make that adjustment within the database. So from there, the next thing that we're going to be mentioning, and it's a slide just a couple more ahead, is a resource that is useful. Just a couple more. It's a useful resource for anyone that's trying to do credential evaluation. It's the Guide to Bogus Institutions and Documents, and we actually on this call today have some of the contributors that have been part of this publication. Jasmine.
Thanks, Drew. Yes, and it was a really wonderful experience to be part of this publication, because the battle against detecting fraud and bogus institutions, fraudulent documents, falsifying documents has not gone away, and unfortunately it has proliferated in the sense that because of technology, we are going to see even more sophisticated replications of documents, and also the emergence and growth of diploma mills. So this publication, Bogus Institutions, is a wonderful book to have. And there's 3 of us from IESC who have contributed. The chapter that is on electronic academic records was written by Igcse. The chapter on fighting fraud in the admissions and registrar's office was contributed by Ann Koenig and Ed Devlin. And then the one that I did was diploma mills and fake degrees. But there's also really terrific titles such as a chapter on transcript fraud and handling fraudulent documents. There's one by the former retired FBI agent, Alan Ezel. This one is on accreditation mills, really, really interesting. And he also wrote another chapter on Igcse, which is the infamous diploma mill in Pakistan. The New York Times did a expose on them a few years ago. They were raided by the authorities in Pakistan, but a few years later, they have sprung up again. And they are not just creators of diploma mills, but also accreditation mills. So that's a really good chapter to read. Additional ones are, the diploma mills, the $1 billion a year industry. It just goes on, detecting fraud in secondary school credentials, and sadly, fraudulent evaluation services. So these are just valuable tools and references to have, all brought to you in this wonderful publication. So I highly recommend you getting a copy. And thank you to my colleagues who all contributed to this publication. Thank you.
So one of the other things that we have heard from all of you is that it would be really useful to be able to review what some of these documents would look like. That is one thing that can help aid you when you're trying to determine authenticity of a particular document, in addition to reaching back out to the author, to the issuing institution, and all of your other legwork that goes into it. And we know you want to see those documents. And so we are in the final stages of coming up with that mechanism to deliver that for you. We've partnered with different colleagues on how we're going to be bringing these sample documents and get them into the pipeline, into Edge. This is something that we want to be responsive to what you tell us you need. And so we really appreciate your feedback, and it is something that helps inform the decisions that we make moving forward with Edge. And one other thing that is available right now, if you navigate to the ACRO website, there is an international exam status report. On the next slide, there's a little bit of information about Jonathan Cownwin, who is our colleague who puts all of this together. He has been scouring the internet, searching for information on exam status, delays, changes, updates. All the information that he can find is being consolidated into this one spreadsheet that you can find if you navigate to the ACRO site. In the international section, there's actually a resources page that has tons of great information that you can sort through. One of them is this status report. If you find out more information that needs to be updated, we appreciate hearing from you. His email address is listed there. But this is a resource that we know is very timely, because right now, things have been up in the air, things are changing, and we still we haven't established what the new normal is going to be after the pandemic. So the International Exam Status Report is just one more thing that we're doing to try to give you that information that you need. And I think we've got a couple more questions that I think I've seen a couple that have been coming up in chat. Julia, have you seen some good ones?
I have seen a couple. One of the questions we were asked right away was about the IGCSE and what the placement recommendations are for those. So Jasmine or elsewhere, if
Sure.
anybody could answer that question.
Well, I believe we have in the write-up for the country profile, or just for the IGCSEs, recognize them as comparable to completion of senior high school in the United States. And then it's subject to your institutional policies, but typically most institutions are looking at for a minimum of 5 or more subject passes on this examination. But maybe Robert, you could also chime in as to what UT Austin's perspective is on the IGCSEs.
Sure, that's pretty much universal. I think everyone is in agreement that that 5 or so passes on the GCSE in the UK, or its international version marketed out to the rest of the world, IGCSEs. That 5 passes, usually with distribution. For example, the NCAA for Division I, Division II member institutions is looking for 5 passes with an English, a math, a science, that is to say physical science, lab science, social science, and then one other core academic core subject, such as a foreign language or something similar that would complement the 4 distributed ones. That would comprise the equivalent of high school graduation in the United States. Just an aside, historically, EDGE represents those of us that are, by and large, year counters when we do overseas credential comparison. But in the area of secondary study, traditionally, we have been much more flexible. Those of us that normally count years at the post-secondary level are a bit more flexible at the high school level, at the sub-university level, sub-tertiary level. And that is 11 years, say, coming after Form 5 in the UK or similar time out in the rest of the world, is not particularly problematic for us, even though here in the United States, high school graduation comes after 12 years. Because we feel that the content of what's found in the examinations of the GCSE is sufficient and certainly on par with anything in US public or private high schools. And so we're more than content with that, even though it comes at 11 years. Plus, we note that a number of countries around the world, particularly in Latin America, I would point out, have 11-year systems that are not proving to be problematic for us. So also too, if folks want to submit those syllabuses, they're all online. So you could easily pull down the the IGCSE math syllabus that maybe is put out by Cambridge International Exams or by edXL, Pearson's, or someone, and show it to your faculty, and then they can confirm that that's every bit good senior or even advanced high school mathematics or whatever the subject may be. We do not, and with this I'll conclude, we do not recommend advanced credit at the freshman level in U.S. colleges for GCSEs or IGCSEs. That is reserved for the higher qualifications known as the GCE advanced levels or A-level exams. Back to you guys.
All right, thank you, Robert. Any other questions? I do see we have one, which we can answer quickly, but if you have a question, please feel free to put it into the Q&A and we can answer it here. There was a question as to whether or not the guide to bogus institutions would be available to all members, and indeed it is. I just need to go to the ACRO website, to our publications, and that's where you can purchase the volume.
And it is going to be available at a discount for members. That is one of the benefits of ACRO membership. There are many. You also get a discount on your Edge subscription if your institution is an ACRO member institution. So just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Great, thank you, Drew. Let's go on ahead to the next slide, and I'll talk a little bit about the last few things and see if we get any more questions coming in. We'd like to make you all aware of the Gloria Nathanson Research Fund for International Education. This is a great opportunity for you to apply for an award, and the awards are up to $1,000, which can be made to support travel expenses, research materials, or other direct costs related to research. So some of the types of projects that are funded are the full country profiles, the substantive country updates, white papers on subjects of interest. This really is a nice opportunity to encourage you and to also give you an incentive in pursuing your research and research topics that you're interested in. Let's go to the next slide. Also, we have been very busy during this last year of the pandemic, producing content for our online and on-demand courses. These are quality online courses. They're self-paced, stackable modules. We've integrated these with digital badging. So this is really an opportunity to enhance your professional development. We encourage you to take advantage of it. In the international arena alone, 10 courses have already launched and there are more to come. So we really encourage you to go onto our website and to see what is there and to think about ways that you might be able to take advantage of some of those courses in your professional development. Looking to see any other questions. Still don't see any. Okay, last chance, guys. Let's get in there and ask some questions if you have them. And then we'll go ahead and go on to the next slide. And we'd like you to stay informed with ACRO. One of the ways that we have really encouraged you to stay informed and to keep up to date on what's going on is to use the bookmarks feature that is included in Edge. Also, the emergent news items. I know we have been talking nonstop about all the things that are going on, certainly as a part of what we've seen with the pandemic, canceled examinations, other online digital documents, who's doing what with their documents and as far as sending out documents. So a lot of information and news there, and really just makes your Edge subscription more robust. So we encourage you to take advantage of that. All right.
There is one question in the
Thank you.
Q&A.
Oh, I see it now. Okay, so Catherine has asked, I'm working with 2 German student athletes, and I've noticed that the NCAA has included 2 grades that convert to Bs, whereas the ACRO scale includes 2 grades that convert to C. Do you know why there is such a big difference in scales? Anybody like to
I'll
take
take-
that?
Yes, I'll take that one, Julia.
Okay,
I was on the NCAA International Student Records Committee from 2002 to 2011. By the way, Jen Mink, who's also on this in this webinar, was on it subsequently when I rolled off. So she might even have some additional information if she wants to throw some that's more recent. But basic bottom line here is that what we tried to do in the NCAA committee was to come up with some grading scales that could be used by staff, admission staff and coaches and others to determine what the GPA, the core GPA would be for individuals from different countries and how they would equate to the US letter grade grading scale system 4.0. And the reason for that, of course, is that the NCAA freshman eligibility is predicated upon a core GPA matched with a test score from ACT or SAT. And so we went to a number of different sources. I mentioned earlier the IERF publications. We looked at that. We looked at some that NAFSA had put out, that ACRO had put out in some of their training sessions that you've heard about from Julia, and just from different sources, and tried to come up with what we thought would be more or less what all of them seemed to be saying, and where they differed, we had to make the decision. Now, ACRO Edge grading scales reflect the IESC's thinking, and it's done much the same way as what we did on the NCAA committee. But ultimately, and this is really, really important, if you're dealing with athletes with the NCAA, you must go by what's in that guide, that international handbook, which is free and can be downloaded off the web, because I look at it all the time for UT athlete questions that come up for me. But the point is that that's what they look at. So if you're coming up with a grading scale that's different, then they're going to ignore that, and they're going to look at what they've come up with, or what our committee and the subsequent editions of that committee have come up with, maintained, changed, altered, perhaps, and so forth. Now, to the actual question, Germany's a difficult one. Grading in Germany is relatively severe. I think we all know that. One of the folks that was on that committee at the time I was there, and I think she remained subsequently, though she may not be on there now, was Karen Lucas, who had done some publications on Germany, former DDR, East Germany, and so forth, Austria. And she made some recommendations, and we felt that those were viable and they were good. Basically, there are some that believe that befriedigen is a pretty solid grade, but it also kind of is leaning towards the C. I know when I first started years and years ago, I thought of befriedigen as a C after sehr gut and gut, A and B. But I think most of us agreed that was a quite satisfactory above average pass. Certainly Karen thought so. So we felt that should be a B as well. Then as you go down some, it gets to be more of an equivocation there. Certainly Ausreichen is not a strong grade. And so we slowly but surely put that together. I think we sometimes debate in IESC, and sometimes, a lot of times we're unanimous, but there are times when we're not. And so I can't even recall if there was much in the way of dissension or discussion with respect to the German grading scale, but ultimately we felt pretty good that befriedigen belonged still in the B range and had it there. So we may have come to a different conclusion at the NCAA committee, but again, I'll conclude by saying, please, if you're dealing with athletes and you're Division I, Division II, then please use the scale that the NCAA has provided, because that is what they will go by, regardless of any other scale you wish to use. Now, for admission purposes, you're on your own, but for determining freshman eligibility under bylaw 14.1, you really need to use that scale that's in there.
Thank you, Robert. Okay, I do have one thing I want to mention. We have a question here simply asking who to email to discuss user experience, navigation functions, etc. in Edge. And that would be, we have a dedicated email address. Drew, could you put that into the chat for everyone?
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to just be edge@acro.org, but I know that it can be difficult to spell acro sometimes, so.
I hear that.
Yeah. When you do email over to edge@acro.org, there's a high likelihood that you're going to wind up speaking with me, with Drew Carlisle. I'm happy to answer any of the questions that you have about how to navigate through Edge. That's something I'd be happy to work through with you.
Drew, could I throw something else in there?
Go for it, Robert.
You know, we welcome questions. There's no question about that, and we will certainly try to answer those in as timely a fashion as possible. But let me just sort of emphasize the kind of questions that are really meant for Edge, and those that might not be. The ones that are, of course, have to do with Edge content. You know, why doesn't this work? Or this link doesn't work? Or how come you don't have this credential in there? And why do you say what you say about the credential in Edge Nigeria that you say, and so forth? All of that is quite acceptable, quite useful, and we try to get back to information. And sometimes, as I hope these Edge user group meeting webinars bring out time and time again, a lot of changes get made because of the things that you bring to our attention. However, one of the things that we feel that the Edge mail-in dedicated email address is not really for is not telling people how to become international evaluators, how to what's an official document, should I be admitting people that are that have this level grade or that level grade. Certainly you can question, as the young lady did a moment ago, about the athletic question about the grading scale, why those differ. I'm more than happy to jump in on that. But there are other venues for training folks up to be international evaluators and become really good at this. And ACRO provides many of them. Some of our other colleagues provide some as well, some of the credential services. But certainly ACRO does, not only with those modules that you heard about a moment ago from Julia, but the Summer and Winter Institutes, which, thanks to the pandemic, have been somewhat set aside for the moment, but are beginning to come back. So keep your eye out for those. In fact, we're going to get back into that again virtually, and then hopefully, before you know it, in person again. But those are good training opportunities rather than the Edge IESC folks trying to teach folks how to become international evaluators. We're more interested in things that you find or don't find in Edge and where we can help in that regard. Thanks.
Thank you, Robert, for that important distinction and clarification, because I think that is important. And there is, we do have the International Institute coming up in July. So anybody that's interested, please visit our website and look in for our trainings and courses as well. Thank you, Drew.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to mention that we do have something coming up in just about a month. It's going to be the International Institute. It will be hosted virtually that July 14th through the 21st. And so there's 5 2-hour virtual instructor-led training sessions. So you can go on over to the website and you can look a little bit more about that opportunity and others. But Robert, thank you for highlighting what the difference is between those questions that are best for Edge and those questions that are best to be addressed in a different location. Are there any other questions that we can answer today? Ian, if you want to shoot me over that email, I'd be happy to walk through everything with you. Or if there are no other questions, maybe I can take care of it right here.
Drew, could you let everybody know when our next Edge user group meeting is?
Absolutely. So we host these Edge user groups on the third Thursday of every month. And so next time around, it's going to be right smack dab in the middle of July, right on the 15th. So Thursday, July 15th at 2 p.m. Eastern, same bat time, same bat channel, right back here. You'll be able to register and come back and hear about some of the updates that we're going to have. We've been doing some research on WAEX, the grading scales and the timeline for when that was implemented in each of the 5 countries. We've been doing some research on Ethiopian secondary credentials. There's going to be more content to discuss with you at that point, but that's going to be on Thursday, July 15th, 2 p.m. Eastern.
Okay, with that, I will thank our panelists for their time as always. And thank you to all of you for being Edge subscribers and joining us today. This is what we look forward to doing, is sharing with you. So thank you and have a good rest of the week.
Thank
Bye
you.
all.
Thanks, Julia.
Sure.